Before watching this video, make sure that you have already watched the videos on class and object and structure as well. I provided the links for these videos just below the comment section. In the previous lesson, we have seen how to create a structure, defining its members, such as properties, constructors, and methods. In this lesson, we will use the same examples, but it will be in the form of a class. Okay, so let's start. And let's start writing our class just at the top of our main method. So we start writing our class by typing the keyword class followed by the name of our class. And then within the curly braces, we define the members of our class. So let's start with the title. And then from here, we're going to define the first property of our class. So let's write here public. Then we have to provide the set accessor and the get accessor. So let's write here the get and the set. And then let's just return the value of our title. For set accessor, let's first identify or determine if the title that we are going to assign is empty or not. Else it will contain the title that we want to assign. So we have now our first member of our class books, which is called the title property. Now let's create a constructor for our books. So to create a constructor, let's write here the public keyword followed by the name of our class name. And then we will add some parameters in our constructor. So let's add the author, title, and the chapters for this book. And then we will assign the title private variable with a value of our parameter underscore title. Same thing with our author and chapter. So let's create first our private variable for our chapter. For the last assignment statement, let's write here our private array of string that will hold our chapter titles and initialize it during construction of the object. So let's assign here chapter titles. Then let's give this a value of whatever the value of our chapter's parameter variable. Before we accept the chapters, let's first evaluate if it is less than or equal 0 because chapters basically should be at least greater than 0. So let's write here if the chapter is less than 0, then we will throw an error. And we can do that by typing here throw new argument exception, and that will be an argument out of range. Then we will state here that chapter must be greater than 0. Okay, so it will raise an error if our chapter is less than or equals 0. Okay, we forgot to add braces in our string variable. So next we will add a method that will help us to add chapter titles to our book. So let's create a method here, public void add chapter title. Then let's create a parameter variable of string that will help us to pass arguments. So let's write here string of t. Okay, so let's add now the chapter titles starting from 0 to contain whatever the value of t. But we want this to be in dynamic form. That is why we have to turn this number into a variable. So let's create a new private variable here, private int current chapter. Let's assign this with 0, and then let's replace this with current chapter. And then let's increment our current chapter by 1. Okay. And then after adding all the chapter title, let's show the titles that we have added. So we have to create another method that will show all the chapters that we have added. Okay, so that's about it for our class. And now let's put this into use. So let's create a new variable here. Let's give this a title. So let's say OP in C sharp. The author is um, John Wick, and the number of chapters is 4. And then let's add the chapter titles for this book. After adding all the chapters, let's now show and display the titles of our chapters by calling the show chapter titles. Okay, so let's try running this application. Okay, so we have an error. It shows here that the chapter is 0. So we missed the underscore here. So we have to add the underscore, and let's try running this again. Okay, so this is now the result. Then let's go back to our Visual Studio and let's add the final property for our book class. So this time let's add and override the toString method. So let's write here public override toString method. And then we will use a lambda notation for returning the title of our book as well as the author. Okay, so we don't have yet the author, so let's create our author property. And then let's add this to our constructor. So let's try running now our application. But let's have another line here that will show the author and the title of our book. So let's create a new line here so that we can separate the chapters to our author. Let's try running the application. So there's no result for our toString method. So let's go back again. Let's put this inside of our console.write line. Okay, so this is another result. So let's review what we did here. So we defined a class named books, and we have 4 private variables. So the first one is the title, second is the chapters, the third one is the chapter title, and the last one is the current chapter. So this is a constructor that helps us to assign default values to our private variables. So this will contain the title of our book, the author of the book, and the number of chapters that we have for our book. So if the chapter title is less than 0, so meaning those are negative numbers including 0, then we will throw an error. So it will raise an error telling us that chapter must be at least greater than 0. Otherwise, it will accept the number of chapters. And then we set the chapter titles to the number of chapters that we have. And then this is the method for adding a title in our chapter. So using the private variable chapter title and the current chapter, which is basically starts with 0, and then the value that we want to add to our array. Then as we add, we increment our current chapter by 1. And then we showed the chapter titles that we have added by iterating or by creating a for loop statement that loops throughout the number of items that we have for our chapter titles. Here we are displaying the index of our chapter title as well as the content of our chapter title. So it's better if we will add one here so that it will start at 0. Then a shorthand notation for our author property. And then we overrided the toString method of our books. Instead of returning the name of the object of our book, it will return the title of the book and the author of the book. And then another property that help us to sanitize the value of our title. So before we accept the title, it checks if the value that we are adding or assigning is empty or not. If it is empty, then it will assign no title. Otherwise, it will assign the title that we want to assign. And then we made use of it by creating a variable out of books class. And then we call the constructor to assign these values here. And then we add the chapters, we show the chapters, and then we also printed the author and the title of our book by using the toString method. Okay, so I hope that you learned something from this video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next lectures.